Sometimes mixing alcohol and some of that sweet, sweet cheeb with D&D can be super fun in moderation. Though other times, it can bring down everyone else's experience when it comes to playing this great game. This next story by a Reddit user by the name of SWJS1 is an example of when D&D and weed don't mix. Before we get into it though, remember to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. I would really love for this channel to grow. But with the normal YouTube stuff out of the way, let's dive right into the story. Names changed to preserve confidentiality. I've been aware for D&D for years, through satire and parodies and just pop culture in general. But when you live in bumfuck USA, you're never really sure if you can find people to play or not. On a whim, I suggested to my circle of friends that we should try playing D&D back in early August. And to my surprise, they were all down. My friend Gage had even already been playing the game for 2 years, so he offered a DM for us. He turned out to be a good DM, whipping up a politically charged homebrew setting, the first session of which took place on September 2nd, 2020, during which I decided to play a Tabaxi wild magic sorcerer who was a former slave. We were all brand new players though, so at the time it was a bit of a clusterfuck as we weren't really sure how to play our characters in combat. One player stopped enjoying it and left, but my friend Jackson, another total newbie at the game, came in to replace him, and it was relatively smooth sailing from there as we learned and grew. Gage and I also joined another campaign, the DM of whom was a friend of someone I knew in the Destroy All Humans official Discord server. At first this campaign was really enjoyable, but after I think only 3 sessions, it went downhill. The DM would hold session 0 last minute. He was always too focused on playing by the rules and following advice from very specific YouTube experts, and his pacing was strangely bad, almost as if he was abandoning ideas as we were playing them. For example, the party ended up playing a magical instrument that teleported to a strange, otherworldly desert of black sand with shrieking volcanoes and oily black worms with porcelain doll heads. That's some, Silent Hill type stuff, huh? The dead were this world's living, and we were perceived as undead. So we picked a direction to avoid coming across any cities trying to find a necromancer, found the city anyway, and ended up getting sent back to our home realm all in the time it took Gage to get a snack. This DM's PC was also starting to suffer frequent blue screens, so our sessions ended up going on hiatus quite frequently. Then, one day, he just decided to abandon this campaign we invested in, and held a session 0 for some sort of Mad Max meets Waterworld meets Final Fantasy campaign he'd sprung on us. A few players were understandably upset. I myself even commissioned art of my Leonin Barbarian because I loved the character that much. For those weeks, this guy's campaign was floundering like a dying fish, and my creative juices would be flowing. I'd even lay awake at night, mind like a buzzing hive of angry hornets as idea after idea came to me. Thus, in late October, I began to work on my own homebrew campaign setting in earnest. I didn't tell any of my friends at first, simply because it was an intimidating endeavor and I wasn't sure if I wanted to commit yet. Right about the time that Assassin's Creed Valhalla came out, I spent time in between playing that, watching very helpful videos from one Mark Sherlock Holmes, the DM for Yogscast D&D Twitch stream High Rollers D&D, whom I'd found and begun watching through their fantastic Arios campaign, shortly after Gage's campaign with us started. Taking his advice to heart, as well as looking at what did and did not work from previous campaigns I played, I'd finally crafted something I was confident people would enjoy playing in. I took my role as DM quite seriously as well, investing in resources like Incarnate to make maps, as well as multiple sets of dice, and setting up a virtual tabletop in the form of a Discord server. Given there was a plague choking the world and Gage lived in a completely different state. I even homebrewed 2 specific races unique to the setting, the Hind, Anthro Deer people, and the Luciprine, Anthro Wolf people. So I finally announced that I was going to run my own RP-based D&D campaign, set in my homebrewed world of Vistarion. Gage, Jackson, and my other friend Tasha were immediately keen. James, the best friend of the DM whose campaign didn't work out, also wanted in, especially as he was also miffed about the one campaign put on indefinite hiatus after only 3 sessions. Finally, we got our last player in the form of a nice chap from the UK, England specifically, who had never played himself before but happened to be a High Rollers fan like myself. Jackson decided to go with a stealthy Lupercine armorer artificer named Sternagel, literally Star Soul in Norwegian. James went a step beyond and asked me if he could play a servitor, literally a deer centaur. There are no words to describe how yes I was for this idea, and he named her Caseta. Gage decided to play as a Githyanki pirate swashbuckler rogue named Ryasan. Tasha went with a high elf of the moon elf variety named Nyana. My nice UK player chap, Luke, decided to play as a tiefling rogue of the inquisitive variety named Shadow. Session 1 began with the party aboard a ship of pirates, the Moon Scythe, chartering cheap passage to the city-state of Cetruna, built entirely across an entire archipelago of large islands connected by bridges. The ship they were aboard, captained by a Githyanki named Vesik Deshawn. Imagine Jack Sparrow as a Githyanki. Also, yes, this NPC was very popular. I even watched the entire movie saga just to get his mannerisms and voice right. Half of Vesik's crew stole a smaller ship and rammed it into the Moon Scythe, damaging the hull and ensuring the ship couldn't move, before engaging in a mutiny that my players staved off quite well. They had a lot of fun with this, particularly because of Githyanki Jack Sparrow. Afterward, they landed in Cetruna and set out towards small goals. The only problem player at this point was Jackson, who didn't even have his character sheet up on D&D Beyond when I needed him to make checks. The frustrating thing with him is, brutal honesty here, he's a pothead who's obsessed with wolves and Dragon Ball. And even though he had weeks in advance to do so, it was clear that he didn't read any of the house rules, setting lore, or racial background info on his character. Where everyone else was familiar with the setting, their characters, abilities, and such, he was struggling, constantly having to stop and look stuff up. He later straight up told me that reading a lot gave him a headache. Disclaimer: I don't mind him smoking recreationally at all, but it does very noticeably change his behavior and mannerisms. For the worst, most of the time. It was clear that he was still in a video game mindset because he also wanted to go up to a guard and try to bribe him with 1,000 GP, and then promise him another 15,000 GP. The rest of us were flabbergasted. I asked him if he even had 1,000 GP on him, which was when we found out he didn't even have his character sheet up. Once he got it open, he only had 20 GP from his urban bounty hunter background and choice of wealthy lifestyle. Plus, he hit me up a couple of days later, having learned about the wish spell, which artificers will never even get unless they find a scroll and are of the appropriate level to use it. And started making up hypotheticals trying to metagame and find cheap ways to cheese any and every situation. So I made sure to make him aware of the balancing for Wish, and that there was a chance that he'd never be able to cast it again, even if he could cast it. When I asked him if he understood, he said, yeah, the DM controls everything and it's impossible to win against the DM. And I was just like, no, dude. The game isn't about beating the DM. You're not playing a COD match against me specifically. It's a role-playing game. Roleplay. The point is not to just win my encounters by any means necessary. As DM, I create a world and bind it by rules. Those rules apply to all of us, the DM included. NPCs, monsters, and even the big bad guys are bound by the exact same rules you are. I make the same rules for them that you make for your character. It is balanced that way to be fun for everyone. I also made certain to explain to him to try not to metagame, but treat it like he's actually his character in this world, as if he were acting. Quote, you're not Johnny Depp, you're Jack Sparrow. Jack Sparrow doesn't know what hit points and D20s and spell slots are. Neither would your character, right? End quote. Aside from Jackson being a half-baked doofus though, everyone generally had fun and didn't have any complaints. Gage even complimented me on my pacing, world building, and NPCs, which honestly floored me as I wasn't expecting for it to go so well. I became more confident in my ability to DM, but I also kept myself grounded in reality for the inevitability of screwing up at least once. I was not ready for how bad Session 2 went. Jackson got high just before the session, breaking one of my Session 0 rules to be clear-headed for the game. That's 6 hours max a day, 1 day a week. It really wasn't a big ask. I want my players present at the table and capable of saying their own name. He frequently interrupted other players' roleplay, basically tried to force scenarios on me in character that made zero sense, waffled on and ruined the pacing. He would over-explain what he wanted to do and be completely redundant. I want to walk up and talk to him. That's all I want to do. Just walk up and talk to him, okay? I just want to talk to him. That's it. I just want to talk to him. He would refer to characters like Arden from Final Fantasy XV, just to explain how his character bows and tips his hat. He drew comparative analysis to everything I described. He even tried comparing a Warforged to a plant-type Pokemon. And he was frequently glory-hounding, trying to interject his character in every other character's moments, even if he was miles away from them. James had to leave early during Session 1, so I intended to start Session 2 off by catching up his character. Caseta, his servitor girl, went to the Grand Temple to seek counsel on the issue of a blight ravaging her hermitage. The High Priestess had her imbibe a strong incense which gave her a vision of my world's goddess of the earth. In describing the setting of the vision, literally an idyllic meadow glade with a pond, he derailed the scene to compare it to Hircine's hunting grounds from Skyrim. To which I replied, not even close, and then immediately got the reply of, oh yeah, no, so it's like Fenrir's hunting grounds in Norse mythology? I was just like, yeah, sure, if only to placate him and keep the scene moving. What should have only taken 20 minutes took up an hour because of constant interruptions. Not to mention the abject confusion he caused. While investigating the site of a large explosion, he asked the lead investigator what the guards whose remains were at the blast site were doing there, as if she was omniscient and would know. So I invented a Magitech crystal that acts like a two-way radio on the spot and had her contact the captain of the guard, who revealed the guard patrol reported in about a strange metal man, a Warforged. So, in character, or I think he was at least, he mentions that he thinks this explosion may have had something to do with his character's brother, whom it had been established in Session 1 was captured and currently in the custody of a guild of self-righteous anti-thief zealots. The NPC became confused and asked him if his brother was made of metal, after which he clarified that he thought whoever caused the explosion might be trying to get away with his brother right then and there. James's character Caseta finally got the pacing back on track by passing an investigation check and finding a trail to follow, only to then have Jackson want to go back to the crater and look for more clues, despite the fact that they all literally had a trail to follow now. Upon following the trail, they found a portal, which Jackson's character wanted to travel all the way back across town just to report it to the lead investigator. I intended for the session to last 6 hours maximum, as Luke is from the UK and is 5 hours ahead of the rest of us. His constant nonsense dragged the session out to 8.5 hours, and all but one other player got frustrated and left before I could give out XP at the end. I also called him cheating. He frequently told me that he had a +6 in multiple skills. The highest number he had across all skills was at most a 4, and that was with proficiency. He told me he had a +6 in Persuasion. When I checked his character sheet on D&D Beyond, Persuasion was only a +2. He never rolled any lower than a 15 either, and probably got at least 6 nat 20s. Toward the end of the session, I can remember Luke piping up, wanting to talk about a backstory detail that had been established. Before he could even get 2 words in edgewise, Jackson immediately interrupted him. saying he wanted to do that side quest we talked about. It probably didn't help that he was so loud that it basically sounded like his mic was down his throat. Luke essentially just said, "We can do it next session," and left, the last one to leave before the session really ended, leaving only Gage. Honestly, I didn't have any clue as to what side quest Jackson was talking about until he reminded me anyway. He said he wanted me to put in a side quest given by Talion from Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor/War, in which he gives his Wolfman the quest to retrieve Urfeel from a cave a la Skyrim. The reason? Not to grow his character or go on an epic quest. He merely wanted me to straight up plagiarize Warner Brothers just so his character could make a little extra money. Gage was completely beside himself. After the session ended, Gage pulled me aside to basically just vent, and I had to send apologies to the rest. Needless to say, he got a big talking to afterward, and I filled up an entirely new server channel full of rules addressing all of that. Funnily enough, the thing that really broke me and made me straight up confront him, a day after the session, he called me on Messenger and told me that he wanted me to just make up an NPC who was irrationally afraid of his character, just so he could make an easy intimidation check so his character could find his missing wife, which is literally his character's entire goal of the campaign. I decided to enforce my no mind-altering substances rule, and he insisted that he be able to smoke weed, that it didn't make him high, and that CBD made him puke. When I wouldn't relent, he rage quit the game after trying to guilt trip and manipulate me into letting him get high. On the bright side, we immediately filled his player slot within an hour, and he did call me after the session and apologize to me. I am pleased to report the third time is in fact the charm. With my problem player sorted out, the other players had a lot of fun, and I as a DM have fun as well. Session 3 went damn near flawlessly as a matter of fact, so my confidence is certainly back. I decided to keep Jackson's Lupersing character around as an NPC, played off the events of Session 2 as him getting drunk off his ass on wine, and took a much more serious tone with the character to set up for some potentially cool stuff in the future. Gage's Githyanki pirate started getting ready to get his own ship to ferry the rest of the players around on. We introduced our new player's character, we'll just call him John, a changeling wizard who's a bit of a quirky chef. He would literally just offer everyone he met an omelet and a cabbage. Tasha's moon elf paladin and James's servitor druid, Caseta, teamed up to help rescue the high priest from the same guild that had Jackson's character's brother. The entire party worked to save the brother, before then working with said brother to plan a heist on the city-state's treasury to recover artifacts and gold stolen from the priestess. During the rescue mission, the party found an evil-looking book wrapped in chains in the Problem Guild's HQ. Gage's Gift pirate tried to lockpick the lock securing the chain, only for the heat the book was radiating to turn the pick molten in his hand. He then found a scroll of protection from evil and good, before then reattempting to unlock the book, and succeeding. That released some sort of evil power into the world, so that was fun. They found the Anthro Wolf brother in the torture chamber, having his memories drained out of his mind through his eyes, blinding him in the process, by a scary Magitech machine, and stored in a huge crystal ball. After rescuing the brother and the priestess, Gage's pirate decided to deny this guild the memories of the poor wolfman, and so opted to shatter it, which destabilized and caused it to build up to an explosion. It was pretty clutch as the base exploded. They crossed a rope bridge connecting the cars the base was built into to one of the archipelago's main islands. They got lucky, caught the bridge ropes, and swung on them Indiana Jones style to safety before climbing up the island's cliff face, and then GTFOing to a place that didn't just, quote, "splode bigly," with even the old priestess NPC making a good roll or two and getting in on the adventurous shenanigans. We're up to Session 12 as of now, and the party just completed a regional arc by defeating the Queen of the Trolls and stopping her from turning the whole world into stone. And there you have it. The story of how my best friend's emotional addiction to pot caused him to ruin my second ever session of D&D as a DM. Fortunately, this one at least had a happy enough ending. Definitely not a bad way to transition into 2021. I decided to take it as a good sign. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against the devil's lettuce, and even partake myself on occasion. For some people, it can be a great way to loosen up and get your creative gears grinding when it comes to role-playing. Unfortunately, it seems like OP's friend was quite the opposite experience. So, what do you think when it comes to recreational drinking or smoking when it comes to playing D&D? I would love to hear other people's thoughts in the comments. Anyways, that was the story. I have been D&D Doge. If you liked the video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you're not already, and I will catch you guys next time.